Welcome back to the Carrot and Stick podcast, a podcast series where we get under the skin of all things sales performance management and motivation to understand what makes our wonderful industry tick. Today, I'm sitting down with Ashley Rice. How would I describe Ash? Ash is a consultant to a lot of businesses around leadership and management and also around data and analytics. He's worked with over 40 businesses over the last few years after a long career in recruitment, working with Hayes and JCW, managing large teams there and really building up a great amount of experience. Today is another very long episode, just like our one with Gary Goldsmith, where we go through understanding what motivates people. We also go through a very interesting topic that will be relevant to a lot of managers today, which is Gen Z. What are they looking for from leaders and managers, and why? Then we end things off by going through the home topic here on the show, data and analytics. Ash has got tons of experience in that area, loads that he shares in this podcast. That's why it's over an hour long. I do apologise. I'll try and get these shorter again. And almost very excitingly, there is no video for him today. I had a few tech issues at the very start. So if you're watching on YouTube, maybe flick away to another tab and don't stare at my face for too long. Either way, let's get into things. It's Ashley Rice here on the Carrot and Stick podcast. Ashley, absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for giving us your time. How's your week been?
Yeah, pretty good. Apart from the weather's been absolutely horrific, let's be honest.
And getting better.
No better. And I met you for the first time this week in real life, which was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, I was seeing a client around the corner and I said to him, I'm going to this place called Half Cooked Coffee. They're like, I've never been there. I'm like, it's literally 2 minutes away. They're like, never been there. I was like, great. That probably means it's going to be terrible, but actually quite nice coffee overall. So I'm not complaining about that one too much.
Lovely venue, lovely company, Derry.
Absolutely. You're too kind, good sir. Anyway, let's introduce to the audience properly. Who are you? What do you do? What's your background? Give us the intro to Ashley Rice.
So, Ashley Rice, I have been in the recruitment world for about 23 years. I was quite old when I got into recruitment, 27, by which point a lot of people have already carved out their careers. But I spent my early life travelling and then working as a manager in Woolworths, actually, for a few years in various stores around North London. Got into recruitment when I was 27. Literally 2 weeks before September the 11th, so it was a pretty bad time to get into recruitment. The market collapsed. Started at Hayes with 12 people on a training program. Within about 2 months, there was just me left. Everybody had left. I got my first leadership role there quite quickly. Within a year, I was doing perm, new business tech in London. Built a perm team, really successful perm team, and then opened an office in Croydon, and then got an office in Reading, Liverpool, Leeds, Manchester, Newcastle, Milton Keynes, Brighton. So at one point I was managing sort of, a team of 60, 70 consultants and quite a big chunk of the Hayes IT and FI. And had a great time there. I spent 10 years there, learnt loads. It was fantastic. And then there was a big restructure in 2011. And I got, I stayed and ran their sales, marketing and retail division for 6 months, but then got headhunted to go and join a niche risk and governance recruiter in the city called JCW. Fantastic business. Guy owned it, was classic entrepreneur, Jamie. I think he'd spent 2 years in recruitment and thought, well, I can do this better myself.
That's not Jamie who's at Interex now, is it?
No, Jamie Woods. He's still at JCW.
I can't think of where I've heard JCW recently.
Don't know.
Wasn't from you, I'm pretty sure, but I've heard the name recently either way. Carry on, sorry.
They're pretty well known, I think, now in the recruitment world.
Yeah.
But yeah, he'd had 2 years' experience at another recruitment business and thought, well, I can do this better myself, which he did. So he set up the business. But he got it to about 15 and didn't really have much experience of managing managers, and he wanted to develop the US. So he brought me in as his managing director, and I spent 5 years there, which was great. Again, I had a really good time, really enjoyed it. We grew the business to, I think it's about 35, 40 headcount when I left. We diversified markets. But the bit I was really enjoying was the people development side. So I created a leadership program to bring people through internally. We did investors in people, and we managed to get a bronze on our first showing there. Sunday Times Top 100, we actually came fourth in our first showing, which was on the back of a strong people development side. And then 2017, 2018, we parted company and I went and started doing what I do now, which is I work with high growth recruitment businesses and tech businesses, and I help to build capability in the leadership team so they can deliver on the growth plans that the board has. I've worked with about, I think it's nearly 40 companies now over the last 5 or 6 years, ranging from kind of, 10, 15 people up to 200, 250. But they've all got one thing in common. They all want to scale. They all want to grow. And the biggest challenge a lot of those businesses have to that is is developing that leadership team so they can bring people in and motivate them and get them to be good billers as quickly as possible. So I do a bit of advisory as well. But yeah, fundamentally, it's leadership coaching, leadership training that I do now.
Like a real journey by the sounds of it, covering many, many bases, and so probably quite rightly so in a spot to advise others on what they should be doing, which I like.
It's been good fun. I love.
Yeah.
It's 23 years now, and I have to say I've had a great time in the recruitment sector. Met some fantastic people, worked with some great businesses, and made some friends for life.
To be really nosy here, and it's just a very purely like personally curious point about the consultancy life versus like full time for one employer sort of life. Do you ever miss being in full time employment and really being on the journey like properly with a company, or do you prefer this kind of where you get to work with multiple at once, for example, and see many journeys going on at the same time, although maybe not as close as you would if you were working for one of those companies?
Yeah, do you know what? It's got its pros and its cons. I think I love going into different businesses and working with lots of different teams and leaders, and I find that really interesting and fascinating. And the experience you get working across a broad range is amazing. And I love seeing the impact of what I do. But at the end of the day, you do walk away. At some point, it might be 6 months. It might be one business I worked with Trenovo for nearly 4 years. But at some point, you will walk away from that business. Your work there will be done, and you never really feel 100% part of something like you did, when you're in full-time employment, and you don't have that going in and seeing the same people every day and building those relationships. Yeah, I'm really feeling part of something, and I suppose that's the bit that I do miss. I don't. There's a lot of it I don't miss, and I went self-employed for a reason. I wanted a change. I wanted that flexibility. I wanted that variety. But yeah, I do miss sometimes that kind of camaraderie. And
I was going to say, kind of the blessing is you haven't got to deal with all the shit that goes on day to day that everyone kind of has to try and sweep under the rug or very quickly kind of like force into the cupboard when they're trying to present themselves well, for example. But by the same token, that's kind of like they bring you in as a consultant to come normally and come in and fix a problem, right? So I guess you still have to deal with some things regardless.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everybody's got a few careers in them, right? And I started in retail, moved into recruitment, had a great time there. But now this is my third career now. My leadership training, leadership coaching, advisory, and I'm loving it. But who knows? In the next 5-10 years, I think I've got one more career shift left in me. But I think that variety is important. And when you've stopped, being really passionate and loving what you do, then maybe it is time to seek a change.
Yeah, spice things up a little bit.
Yeah, and I think I was lucky. I was really clear about what it was I wanted to do. I went. I had some great kind of leadership development when I was at Hayes. I was on the advanced leadership program there, and that really inspired me. I worked with some great coaches. It made me think that's what I want to do at some point because they had such a big impact on me. So, Jamie at JSTED was kind enough to put me through a coaching qualification. And when I did that, I took a week out and did that. For me, it was just really clear that was what I was
really enjoyed.
But yeah, don't get me wrong. I had an amazing time running sales teams and being in that environment. But sometimes you've got to have a change.
Well, the best thing is that's exactly what today's all about, right? Running sales teams. Here we are.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So shall we? Let's get to the meat and potatoes of it then, because like I say, you've got tons of experience in this area. And the 3 topics that you gave me was understanding what motivates people. Good opener. Second one, I like this one actually. It's very focused on. I remember when millennials were coming into the workforce. There's all this talk about millennials, people like me, and what it was that we cared about. It turns out we all care about different things.
Are you a millennial, Derry? Are you a millennial?
Yeah, 31. I think I count as a millennial. At least I bloody hope so.
I thought you were a Zoomer. I thought you were younger than that.
Not quite. No, not. I wish, mate. I wish the wrinkles. They give it all away. But Gen Z and what are they looking for from leaders and managers? And then third and finally, the one that you and I actually had a coffee about last week was all about data and analytics. So a real good range of topics. Any one of those 3 that you really want to start with first and foremost?
Let's start with motivation because I think it's quite a topic that a lot of managers are. It's high up on their agenda at the moment, especially since the market's changed. I think, when it was a boom market, motivation wasn't really an issue. Everybody was happy and making lots of money and doing what they needed to do. But I think since the market has shifted and it has changed over the last year, 18 months, I think motivation has become a lot more of an important topic. Thinking about actually why are your people here? What do they want to achieve professionally and personally through this through this job? What's it a vehicle to do? Because if there isn't anything they want to achieve through their job in recruitment, then is it going to drive them to do the things that motivated people do, which is activate, learn new skills, which is learning new skills and behaviours. Motivated people are persistent, so they're resilient and they're tenacious. Resilient as in the Alan Partridge bounce back ability, and then tenacious as in will they call that prospect once, twice, 5, 10, 15 times until they get through. And also motivated people have a higher work rate. They work harder to achieve their goals. So actually, if people aren't seeing those three things in their team members, then there's a likelihood that there might be a motivation challenge there.
I'll ask the real obvious question out the gate here. The market's really hard right now. People are having to do 5, if not many more times more to get the same results they would have had historically, and in some cases aren't even able to get to there. So when you're saying it's always been a timeless thing to know, okay, what's my purpose in doing this? Why am I here? What is it I'm really trying to achieve?
Yeah.
And someone turns to you and goes, look, mate, I'm making no money because the market absolutely sucks right now. I'm working my ass off and not really getting anywhere. How can I feel motivated? What are you saying in that situation? Because I imagine you've heard that quite a bit in the last 12 months, right?
Yeah, and I think, job performance at an individual level depends on two things. One, it's ability, right? So being able to do what you need to do to be successful. And the other is motivation, right? Wanting to do the things that you need to do in order to be successful, because motivated people do things because they want to. That's what motivation is, not because you're giving them a kick or a carrot, right? So actually, if people, the first thing you've got to look at is, okay, if people aren't doing what they need to do, is understand, is it a skill issue, i.e. ability issue, or is it a motivation issue? Because if you're really motivated but you don't know what you're doing, your job performance is going to be poor. And equally, if you've been really well trained but you're demotivated, your job's going to be poor. So as a leader, you've got to make sure that you provide an environment in which both of those needs can be met. But the reality is, it is a tough market at the moment. And actually, what people forget is that recruitment isn't easy. Now, if you joined recruitment, which a lot of people did when there was the boom post-pandemic, which was a complete aberration in the market. In the 23 years I've been working, I've never known a market like that. I think I just missed the dot-com boom and the big Y2K boom back in the late 90s. But there's never been a market like that. And if you think back to 2017, 18, 19, it was difficult. And I don't think it was any more difficult then than it is now. So part of it is actually
interesting you say that, yeah.
Well, part of it is actually kind of it's a tough job, right? And actually, you do have to work hard, and you do have to be resilient, and you do have to learn new skills and behaviours, which are all the things that motivated people will do. So you've got to have some kind of connection to this job, right? There's got to be something that you want to achieve, and if you do, then you'll do the things that you need to do. But in a market like this, it's a zero-sum game. All you can do is steal business off your competitors. That's all you can do. So you've got to, like I say, work harder, be smarter, be more resilient, tenacious.
Everyone's fighting for the same jobs at the end of the day. What are you doing to make you better than the 50% average line, essentially, right? If you want to be someone that's performing above the average right now.
Yeah. So I'm not sure I buy this kind of like, well, it's a tough market and, I'm trying my hardest. And actually, recruitment's always been tough. And the UK is known for being one of the most commoditized and mature marketplaces in the world. Right. And that's why a lot of businesses have started over the last 5-10 years expanding out to Europe and North America and other markets, because they are less commoditized than the UK. So look, it's a tough job, and you've got to really want to do it. So you've got to have a reason. And yeah, part of that is purpose at the values level, but part of it is, what can I achieve through this job professionally and personally? What difference is that going to make to my life? How will I feel when I get there? How will I feel if I don't? So that's my take on it. It's a tough job, tough gig.
That's fair. I think one thing you probably hear a lot when people speak about motivation, that is, they talk about this kind of purpose and this belonging and your reason for why you are somewhere. Can you think of any, maybe, obviously names not needing to be mentioned here, any kind of tangible stories of where you've gone into a business and worked with the leaders to help them realise what those things are inside of their teams that has then made a real tangible difference to whether it's performance or staff retention or anything along those sort of lines? Just kind of give it some real world substance as well.
Yeah, no, I think having that conversation with the people that work for you, right? And this is what I call invested leadership. Actually, getting to know what makes your people tick, right? So you can only everybody's motivated by different things, right?
Yeah,
and those things change over time. And motivation's not binary. We're not just motivated by one thing. Now, in recruitment, everybody assumes that we're motivated by money, right? And that would be a fair assumption to make. But actually, the reality is, I'd say, and this is going to be very contentious, I'd say 99% of people, money is not their top motivator.
I agree.
Now,
it's really, we speak about this a lot. When people say money, there's always something they want to do with that money that is their real motivator, whether it's buying their first house, getting engaged, buying a car they've always wanted, paying off their parents' mortgage, or whatever it might be. There's always something they want to achieve with that money, right?
Absolutely. That's going back to that. What do you want to achieve professionally or personally through this job? And those are the Kairos events, right? Getting married, buying a flat. They're not the Chronos events are things that happen every year, like, birthdays and Christmas and all that sort of thing. But those Kairos events can quite often mean that money all of a sudden becomes your key purpose. It's your key focus. And it really, you got a clear goal that you want to achieve, and you see people's work rate and resilience and tenacity improve because they've got something that they want to do. But then quite often I'll see that, and I'll look back over people's billings over 4 or 5 years, and they will have had a great year, and I'll go, what happened that year? And they go, well, I was getting married, so I needed to save 30 grand for a wedding, or probably 40 grand now, maybe even 50. I was speaking to somebody the other day. But clear purpose, clear focus, I've got a clear goal. Now, next year their billings drop off. Why did it drop off? Well, I didn't really have a goal that I wanted to achieve, right? So if money was people's key motivators, and I'm going to ask you a question, Derry, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
If money was people's top motivator, what kind of behaviours do you think you would be seeing on sales floors across the country?
I think you'd be seeing very, dare I say, aggressive, anything to get the deal over the line level of behaviours, personally.
Yeah, in part, you might see that. You might see people being a little bit more selfish because it was just all about the money, which isn't necessarily a behaviour that we want to drive. We'd rather have that done collaboratively. But also as well, I think people would be staying later. They would, because opportunity to call more people.
Anything to get the money over the line is the idea, right?
Yeah,
the more you can get through, the more you make.
You'd see people on the phone more. Lots of managers are telling me these days that people don't spend enough time on the phone, or they might be sending out LinkedIn invites on the weekend while they're having a pizza on a Sunday afternoon or Sunday roast. But we're not seeing these behaviours in a lot of cases. My kind of argument is that people value time more than money since the pandemic, because if people are leaving in their contracted hours, that means that they value time more than they value money, because if you want to make more money, you would stay later, right? I think a manager's role these days is to be able to facilitate consultants to be able to achieve their targeted revenue within their contracted hours, right? If your target's 20 grand a month and you're a senior consultant, then you should be working with your manager to be able to build 20 grand a month in the 150, 160 hours that you work in that month. Now, if you want to build 25 grand a month because that's how you're going to get promoted, and you've got a real strong why you want to get promoted because it makes you feel proud, you love telling your friends and families, you really value advancement, well, then you might stay a bit later to achieve that. So people will stay later because they want to stay later, not because their manager's going, right, well, actually, you need to stay later.
This is a really interesting thing. So I spoke about this. We had a podcast episode yesterday with Gary Goldsmith, and he was talking a bit around this sort of piece of, really setting the expectations early doors around, what is it we're here to achieve? If you want to be amazing, I'll make you amazing, but I need you to work hard with me here. It's not going to be roll up at 9, be leaving at first thing at 5 o'clock, for example, not thinking about work otherwise. And as much as some people don't want to hear that in this day and age, if you do want to be wildly successful, if you do want to be making silly money, it's going to require, dare I say, silly investment in terms of time and the hours that you're willing to put in, right?
Absolutely. And, motivated people tend to sacrifice something to achieve a goal, right? And if you're motivated by money, you will sacrifice your time to achieve that goal of making money. If you want to be really successful because what drives you is being the top biller, you will sacrifice your time to achieve that.
Yeah,
But
totally.
if people aren't motivated by those things, we've got to find out what else motivates them, and actually, how can we get them to achieve in their contracted hours? They'll work longer if they want to, if they're motivated to do that. But as managers, how can we get them to do their target in the 150, 160 hours that they're contracted to work each month?
It kind of comes back to, I think, like people often see motivation as like a very binary thing, right? Like either you're motivated by this thing or you're not. There's only one thing you're motivated by, when in reality there's probably like levers that are pulled here in some way, and there's kind of, you fill buckets with more water based on what you're more motivated by. Because for some people, the money thing actually is kind of like the guise for status and respect. They want to be respected by their peers, and the way they think to do that is, I've got to make the most money. If someone points at me and go, "Oh, he's the top biller," you feel like, yeah, I am, I'm amazing. That's what people really want to kind of push for, right? And that's why you'll see you can go out buying flash cars, for example, watches and suits they realistically can't afford, but they'll go out and buy those things because of the status that it brings. For others, it can be about caring for family. It can be about life experiences. And you have to kind of understand, I think, not just, am I motivated by money, or is this person motivated by career progression, but where do they spread their motivation? Sure, what's their number one motivator? But what else are they driven by here, and how can I tap into those different things at different times?
Yeah, so people are motivated by 3, 4, 5 different things at any point in time, and those change over time. So look, the only way that we can find out what motivates people is to have that conversation with them at a deeper level, and that's when you start to go down to more of a values level. So what's important to you? And values are fundamentally intrinsic motivators. So those are things like, Hertzberg said, didn't he? He calls them the motivator factors. So is the work I do meaningful? Am I recognized at work? Am I allowed to achieve? Am I respected? Am I growing? A lot of these things are what motivate people, right? So we all need money and we all want money, but as we grow and as our career progresses, money becomes less important outside of those big Kairos events. It's actually, what am I allowed to do at work? Yeah. And you've got to pay people fairly, and you've got to give them a fair bonus, because if you don't treat them fairly, they'll move. But actually, if you pay people well, you pay good commission, you can take that off the table. That's what Hertzberg referred to as a hygiene factor. But you've got to focus on those motivator factors, because those are the things that get people out of bed in the morning, what they actually do at work and what they can achieve. And there's loads of things that you can do in recruitment, in terms of that can satisfy those more intrinsic values. But we still tend to focus a lot on, well, it's about your bonus, it's about your commission, it's about the trip to Vegas, the ski trip, the lunch club. Well, actually, for a lot of people, they're not necessarily that interested in that. Some people it really motivates them. Other people it doesn't. It's those more intrinsic things, and managers can only find that out by having those conversations with people, which is a bit more difficult, isn't it? Much more difficult sitting down with somebody and go, right, it's really important for me to understand what makes you tick. Let's talk about why you're here and what you want to achieve through this.
And it kind of feels weird to say that the first few times you do it, I think, 'cause you kind of feel like a psychologist or something, really looking to kind of ask someone a personal question. So they'll be a bit like, why do you need to know that? Like, what?
Well, so, you need to know what motivates people so you can motivate people. Otherwise, you're just assuming. And quite often we just project what motivates ourselves, And a lot of managers are really motivated. That's why they're managers. They've been successful billers. They're now managers, and they want people to be like themselves. And that's
where things can go so wrong when someone isn't quite on the same wavelength of like motivation as well. You're trying to force something on them and they're like, whoa, ease off. Like, I'm not like you.
Yeah. And it's, there's the argument that actually it's not necessarily the manager's job to motivate the person, but to provide an environment within which they can be motivated. And in order to do that, you've got to know what makes that person tick. So I think it's just, and this ties into the Generation Z thing. I think people since the pandemic, they want a lot more from the managers, the leaders, and the businesses that they're working for. I think, during that time, people had a lot of time to just reflect on what they do, why they're doing it. It might be their commute, it might be the quality of their manager, how the business treated them, what they actually do. And now they're like, well, actually, I want to get what I need, and if I'm not getting that from the business, then I'm gonna look elsewhere. So there is a much higher expectation from this latest generation of what they get from the businesses they're working
Yeah.
with.
I forget who I was speaking to earlier this week, but someone else said that. They said it's like recruitment's becoming more mercenary now, where previously someone would spend, 5, 10, maybe even more years building a career with a company, whereas now you're very lucky to see more realistically than about 2 years. Like people will like to jump around and believe, for fair reason, it's kind of shown that it's the best way to get yourself pay rises to jump between jobs, for example, or to get towards promotions quicker rather than waiting for a company right now to promote you. That can be the easiest way to do it. But let's come on to what you mentioned there around the whole Gen Z piece. I think that's a really interesting thing because, again, I remember being 18, 19, 20 years old and all I saw anywhere was millennials are coming. Here's how they get motivated. Here's what they want in life. And I'm like, I don't know what I want in life. So how do you know what I want in life? It was really weird. So what do you see about Gen Z? What is it you believe they look for in leaders and managers? I've got a brother who's Gen Z, by the way, so I'm really curious to hear what your take is on this.
The generation's really how people react to the world around them. So it's not okay. Well, it's certain ages dictate their behaviours. Is actually, well, what's happening in the world at that particular point dictates people's behaviours. And Generation Z have come into, they're about 26 now, the oldest Generation Z. So they're about 12, 13 to 26. So we don't know as much about them as we know about the millennials because they're the most written about generation that there's ever been on the planet, right? But what we do know is that they've been through things like Brexit, they've been through the pandemic, they live in a world now which is so expensive, so they're motivated by money, but not necessarily because they all want to be rich. But it's expensive. It's expensive to do anything, right? Look how much those coffees cost you yesterday, Derry. It's going to everyone through expenses, right? So it's about how they react to the world around them.
Absolutely.
And I think the pandemic has really shaped Generation Z, and rightly so. But what kind of things are they looking for? They are looking for a business with purpose. They want to feel like they're part of something bigger than just sending CVs, picking up the phone, getting jobs. So they want to work for a company that's got vision, that's got purpose. They're looking for diversity in the places that they work, and that's not just traditional diversity, but diversity in terms of background, in terms of ideas. They seem to respond better to being coached than being told. Okay, and they always say that training and telling robs people of the experience of discovery. And actually, what I've found with this generation is that they respond much better to being coached, to being challenged, to being given the tools, put in the right direction, and having some freedom and autonomy to get to where they need to go. So I think managers have certainly had to learn how to coach that non-directive way of developing people, because they definitely respond. They respond to it to that kind of development much better. And
I said it might turn around and say to that something like, I remember when I was 25 years old, I hated being told what to do. I thought I had all the answers. Yeah. Classic like young person kind of like nature, I guess, as you do come out like of school, for example, and feel like, right, I'm ready to take on the world now. I've got the answers. I know what I want to do in life. And it does take you 10 years or so to really kind of settle and realize, okay, I don't know everything here. Maybe I should just shut up and listen sometimes. Do you think that's more reflective of Gen Z in particular, or is it more of an age-based thing? Do you think?
Look, I mean, every generation always says about the next generation that they've got it easier, they're overprivileged,
they're entitled, all the rest of it. Yeah. I remember the narrative when I was growing up.
Especially about the millennials. Everybody was, Generation X were particularly mean about millennials and their. Constantly. Now it's the millennials' turn to give it in the neck to Generation Z, right? And I suppose really it's a moot point whether it's just what happens when you're young, or whether it's become more prevalent with the latest generation. I think leaders do have to respond to that, right? In terms of what the environment that they're providing for people, right? Does it have purpose? Are they investing in the people that work for them? Are they spending time with them? Are they helping them to grow? Do they understand what it is that they need to do to get promoted, and what that means, and how they can get there? And developing people through coaching is you're going to get a much better response, regardless of whether it's just because people are young or because it's Generation Z. But I've seen more of it post pandemic, better response, and we know that people learn more quickly through coaching than training anyway. 80% of training gets lost, right? I'm sure you've been out and done a one-up training session with people, and then the next day they phoned up and said, right, well, how do I do this? Right, because we know 80% of it gets lost within 30 days.
It's the power of reinforcement training, right? It's being able to go. I forget what they call the time sequence, but like really, when you learn something, you should revisit it again in 5 minutes, in an hour, in a day, in a week, and that's really how you commit something to memory, is by not just hearing it once or remembering it from like then onwards, but being able to revisit it, to commit it to long-term memory is the most important part. Whereas most training, as you're saying, you do it for a day and then that's it. It's gone. It's forgotten. Like you never look at it again, and that's why things get forgotten so easily.
Yeah, absolutely. So training's best if it's followed up with some element of coaching and accountability. You have to train people, to begin with, which is quite directed, but then follow it up with coaching, follow it up with accountability. I did a thing about this on LinkedIn the other day. I think less is more with training, and make sure that there is follow up and you are coaching to make sure it gets embedded. But I think, if you look back 5 or 10 years, I think it was a much more kind of command and control environment in recruitment. I think, you didn't used to leave before your manager left. You did what your manager told you to do. They didn't have to give the context that people are looking for now. The why am I doing it? We didn't challenge as much as people do now. And I think it's great that people do challenge, because that's how you create innovation in recruitment. If you just accept that it's done the same way now as it was 10 years ago, well, how are we ever going to innovate and grow?
What do you think has led to those changes? I've got like really interesting thoughts around this overall. I think they're interesting anyway, clearly. I think the more like globalized like community we live in now, because of things like the internet, do mean that people's perspectives are much broader and realize they're part of something much bigger, and so aren't happy being part of a small team, being told, get in line, do your job and do as I tell you. They're just like, well, hang on a minute. There's more to life than just this here. I want to understand why. I want to be involved in something bigger than myself. And really it kind of transcends into being about purpose, right? And purpose is more than just yourself or the small team you're in. It's the company, it's your community, potentially the whole world, as we all work together towards whatever the future might bring for us, for example. Do you think that's the sort of thing that's leaning towards it, or do you think something else has led to that more, I don't want to say demanding is the negative way to put it, but the more demanding sort of requirements at work for how people are treated? Where do you think that has come from?
Well, I think it's come from in large part from lockdown. I think people had a lot of time to really assess their lives and what they were doing, who they were working for, where they were going, what they wanted out of their job. And I think that, coupled with a generation that do question more and can do that and can get answers immediately, through Google or whatever. It's bred that, and it's also bred that kind of immediacy that I can get everything now, so I want the same thing at work. I want to get promoted. I want to be earning money quickly. I want to be, progressing and developing and growing quickly. And I think that comes down to managing expectations, because, like I say, recruitment's hard, and it does take, I've always said 18 months as a 360 consultant for it to kind of really, really click, and for you to be able to plan your day and your week and actually go out, get jobs, do that properly, be able to get good candidates, manage the process properly. It's a hard job, and that's why it's a profession. But I think challenging the way that things have been done is a really positive thing. I think it's just less about people challenging. It's more about how the managers respond to that.
Makes sense. Fair enough. Okay, and then let's come on to that third topic then, the data and analytics one. This is the one where you and I actually first got introduced and first got talking about this stuff, was through John, wasn't it? Introduced us from Thrive, I believe.
That's right, yeah.
Good old John, bless him.
John Lennon.
And he was just mentioned there, and we had that first chat, and he said that you used to get quite involved in this stuff as well. Obviously, it's a massively broad topic. It always is when it comes to metrics and KPIs and data analytics and reporting and all these wonderful words that I'm sure we both hear a million times a week. What's your take on that and how recruitment businesses should be using it?
Well, I'm really passionate about data, which sounds a bit sad, but you'll empathise with that, Derry. Obviously,
100%.
Data analytics company. So we started using Cube 19 when I was at JCW, quite early adopters of it there, and I found it a really powerful tool to help to impact performance. And I think that for me is the key thing. It's how can leaders use data to impact performance rather than just review it, right? Because if you are reviewing performance, it's too late. Right? You sat there at the end of the week going, well, we've not had a great week, and this is the reason why, because we didn't do enough business development calls last week, so jobs have dropped. Or actually, we haven't sent enough CVs this week or got enough first interviews. It's too late. You can't change it. So actually, it's getting managers to use data on a daily basis to understand how they can influence performance, how they can use it to spot threats to their pipeline, how they can use it to develop their individuals in their team, and also how they can use it to understand what good looks like. Because I don't buy into this, right, well, actually, everybody in the business needs to send 5 CVs and get 3 interviews and then keep doing that on a rolling basis and you'll make the placements you need. Because everybody operates at different levels of efficiencies and different markets with different experience. So, one person, it can be 10 CVs to a placement. Other people can take 20. So there's no point in targeting them on the same thing. So actually you can use it to create more individual KPIs, if you like, based on actually what people's most recent performance is and what they want to achieve. So it's taking it from a tool to review performance to using it to actually influence and impact and spot threats to the pipeline and develop your people. And I think, you've got that book Traction behind you, right, which is a brilliant, brilliant book. And that's one of the 6 things that he focuses on is data. And he says that that's it. That's the one there. A P&L is what does he say? A P&L is a lag indicator, right? And you can't change it after it's happened, right? Whereas if you use a dashboard, then you can change the future, which is obviously
it's one thing we speak about an awful lot is like looking back at history is great for changing things like processes moving forwards and making those optimizations, but you can't fix something in the moment or realize something's going wrong if you don't have the real-time realization. It'd be like driving your car down the motorway, not having a speedometer, but once you get to your end destination being told, oh, you were over the speed limit at this point, and this point, you're like, oh, okay, great. Well, I didn't know that in the moment, so I couldn't fix it. Yeah. You try telling that to a policeman, sorry, mate, I can't tell in the moment what's going on. I'll have to, just try and learn and figure it out as I go along. It's just not how it works. Yet that's the way that we treat data when running a sales team.
Yeah, and look, in order to be able to use data to make decisions, you've got to have data that's got a level of integrity, right? And it's got to have a level of equivalence of first interview.
I'm sure every person listening to this suddenly thought, yeah, my CRM usage sucks.
Yes, and if it does, then you like I say, you can't really use it to make decisions based around data. So you've got to have that integrity, you've got to have that equivalence. But if you have, then it's extremely powerful to help you make decisions. So if what's that, a cat?
It's a cat. She's being really, really needy. Oh. You know this is. She's lovely. But she is so needy. So I have to keep her on my lap and just stroke her so she doesn't meow the house down, basically.
I'm sure it's been said before, but you look like a Bond villain with the...
I need to do the whole like the spinny chair thing and be like, I've been expecting you, Mr. Rice. Should have done that when you joined the meeting earlier, actually.
Yeah, without a camera, yeah.
Maybe next time,
Sorry, you talking about cat, I've completely lost my train of thought, man.
We were on about like data and the whole speedometer analogy of like needing to have it in real time to know what the hell's actually going on.
Yeah, so look, if I know my team needs to create... If the conditions that they need to create on a weekly basis over a 13-week period is 25 CVs, 15 interviews and 5 jobs. And that's based on what the next quarter's target is and using the ratios working back. So we've got those are real numbers. They're not just arbitrary KPIs. Now, if I come in on a Wednesday morning and we've only got 5 CVs out as a team, well, if we finish the week on 10 CVs, that means that we've got to get 40 out the following week. Otherwise, if it's 10 CVs to a placement, that's a placement and a half that we've lost. And at 10 grand a deal, that's £15,000 worth of fees. So if I don't realise that to the end of the week, I'm playing catch up next week. I come on Wednesday, go, right, guys, we're short on CVs. Why is that? And what can we do to positively influence that? Do we need more jobs? In which case, what do we need to do and go out and get more jobs? Or actually, have we got plenty of jobs, but we're struggling to find CVs? In which case, do we go back to the clients and try and flex? Do we need to find more imaginative ways to find CVs? But actually, how close to that 25 can we get this week if we make some changes? Because if we don't, it's in spite of and not because of what we've done.
Totally.
Similar to first interviews, first interviews are like we need 15 first interviews, and I come in on Thursday and we've got 6. Well, we're definitely behind the curve. So actually, how many CVs we've got outstanding awaiting feedback? Right. Well, if we've got 25 and we know it's 2 CVs to a first interview, well, action is let's go and chase those before they get lost. If we've got 5 CVs outstanding awaiting feedback, well, actually, how can we get more out this week? So it's actually the first thing I used to do every morning for 5 years was come in and look at the data, right? Where is each of my individual teams against what good looks like? And then my conversations in the mornings with the managers would then revolve around that. And all I wanted them to know, Derry, was actually, listen, Ash, CVs are light this week. This is the reason why, and this is what I'm going to do about it. Didn't matter whether it was what they were going to do about it. I could always challenge that, but I wanted them to know where they were, why it was, and what they could do to positively influence that.
And it's that whole piece around accountability, isn't it? It's not you sitting there and trying to talk them through how to do the job. Like, you'd hope you'd hire people who have got the brains about them to be able to figure out those problems, right? But if you're saying, look, here's a problem, there's a gap, we are underperforming, you're the one tasked and you have the responsibility as part of your job to fix that. What are you going to do about it? And talk me through your plan. We'll work through it. And that's what becomes a coaching conversation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're then empowering your managers because you're giving them the framework within which to work, because we've worked it out, totally. Right? We know how many CVs and how many first interviews and how many jobs that your team needs. If you're them, have a look at, dig into the data. I call it popping the hood. Pop the hood, find out why, and what can you do to positively influence it. You've got your lead and your lag indicators, and your lead is obviously your fees. And then in the middle, you've got CVs, first interviews and jobs. But then you've got your real lead indicators, which feed into either getting more candidates or more jobs. So actually, we need to be making sure that things like, it might be candidate calls, it might be registrations, adverts, all these things.
BD calls, all that good stuff.
You can relate those back to, well, how many of those do we need to create a CV submission? So with job, business development calls, client meetings, marketed CVs, how many of those lead indicators do we need to create a job? So you've then got a beautiful flow of, okay, well, actually, between a marketed CV and placing a job might be 12 weeks. Between registering a candidate and placing them might be similar, depending on the sales cycle of your team. If we're spotting that those lead indicators are dropped early enough, we know they're going to have a negative impact, but in 12 weeks, right? So if we spot them early enough, they're dropping, well, we can do something positive about it, right? It's not all about CVs, first interviews, jobs, because actually you've got to make sure the stuff before that is...
Yeah, it's your top of funnel, like we call it top of funnel and real bottom of funnel in software, right? Where your top of funnel are the things that you can do today. So I have a team of SDRs, sales development reps, for example. Their job is to prospect and book meetings with customers, right? Or prospect out to prospects to book meetings in the hope they become customers later. And I have a team of AEs who are our guys who do the demos and then close, negotiate, all that kind of good stuff. A lot of their metrics realistically are the lagging ones. They can only move when we know that meetings are coming through from the SDRs. The SDRs today can control things like how many LinkedIn outreaches am I doing, how many phone calls am I making. Yeah, those are the kind of things they can affect. And sure, in some cases, you might say being able to book in demos or meetings, for example, is also a leading indicator. They can do that today. They can affect it. But you won't be able to do that without doing those real top of funnel, top of line activities that are around actual BD, right? And it's one thing that I don't see enough companies focus on in the recruitment world. Like, we looked a while ago across a number of our customers at what are the most common targets that we see set on the OneUp platform. And I think our top few was CVs and interviews. No surprises, because I call those the golden metrics of recruitment, but they are lagging ones, right? Like, you can't easily impact those today unless you've already got a candidate on your system and you've already got a job on your system. Those are the things that need to really come before that. And there should be more focus around that. Jobs especially is where I think consultants have a real impact, because I think, as most of us know, candidate registrations will come through the website, for example, through LinkedIn outreach, through resources, for example. But on the consultant side itself, I think if you're really getting out there and saying, right, I know that I've got a great number of placements coming in this month, but next month is looking dead. I need to make sure I'm making at least this many BD calls a day this week for me to make sure I've got a good pipeline for next month. I don't think enough people consider what that future state looks like and make sure they're doing the The activity that, yes, is less fun. No one likes being called up all the time to be told, no, mate, got no jobs. Oh, not another recruiter. Piss off. Voicemail, whatever else might come through. But I think that top of funnel activity is so important to prioritise that not enough companies do today.
No, they don't. But also as well, you can work out how many BD calls you need to make over a 13-week rolling period, right? And actually, it's probably not a huge amount. And if it is a huge amount, well, there's a red flag that goes, well, actually, it's taking you 25 business development calls to get a job. Actually, the rest of the business is averaging 12. So let's pop the hood and have a look at what we could change or do differently or train on or put some process in place that would bring that down, because that's too many business development calls, right? So we want to bring it down to a level. And that's where you can use that data to spot where the development needs are in people, in the lead and in those lag indicators. Because similarly, if it's taking somebody 3 CVs to get a first interview, well, actually, we know good is 2.2 across the business. So let's have a look. Let's have a look at what you're doing, how you're doing it, what training and process, coaching can be put in place that can bring that down to 2.2.
Totally.
But yeah, and when things are I've always said, when things are going well and we're getting loads of CVs out and we're getting interviews and deals are happening, there's bad stuff happening in the background. And that's usually candidate qualifications have dropped through the floor, business development calls, client meetings, teams meetings, all those things drop. And this is specifically an issue in perm. And this is why perm fees go up and down all the time. So actually that focus on, in traction, he said, Gino Whitman said you should have a dashboard with between 5 and 15 indicators. Most businesses do. And I think, the reality is in recruitment, you probably need a dashboard of about eight indicators, which stretch from your lead ones to your lag. And I think it's good to focus on the top 2 in each of those lead indicators that are going to have the biggest impact on either creating CVs or creating jobs. Because if you have too many metrics to focus on, you get this goal diffusion and people don't know where to focus or manage their day. And that may change for individuals.
You mentioned Traction, and to be fair, I would recommend it. Anyone listening who's very quite curious to read a book, for example, I would recommend Traction, because the one part in here that I do think we still use, we put EOS, which is the system this teaches you, in place 2 years ago. And the one thing that we still religiously live to, some parts that we haven't been so hot on, but a weekly scorecard every Monday at 12 p.m. I have a meeting with my leadership team, and coming into that meeting, they know they have to have filled out a scorecard that's got they recommend about 15 in the book, but we have about 5 to 10 metrics per department. And what I tend to do before the meeting is sit and go through that list. And it can be things like, I'll tell you what, let's do a little fun exercise while we're actually live on a podcast, shall we? I'll pull up that scorecard now and I'll look at a number and just tell you the kind of things that we track. So things that I'm responsible for reporting might be what's our total revenue, headcount in the business, revenue per head, and how much cash is in the bank. Our marketing guy is responsible for how many inbound demo requests have we got, how many of those have been sat, what's our rolling qualification rate of those, the revenue we've got, the deals that we've won. Sales has got a load more around like partnerships. In customer success, we've got things like how many customers have handed in notice, how many are currently going through implementation, how many of those are late. And the whole idea behind this is that we don't spend an hour going through all these metrics. What we do is go down that list, and it's almost like working on a nuclear submarine, for example, and you've got all your dials. You don't really care until the red light starts flashing. These are things that you can look at and say, okay, then that number looks a little bit strange. I want to flag that as something we do talk about in the meeting. And I can get in there and say, Emma, my head of customer success, our overdue implementations is now at 7. That's obviously going to be disappointing customers. What are you doing about it? And it's like you said earlier on, it's coming back to those numbers and asking those questions. But just having this weekly scorecard, I think that you give someone responsibility to fill out and accountability for the number inside of it is so valuable for just making sure people are always thinking, right, am I actioning these numbers? Because I know if I don't, Derry's going to ask me. I have to come into that meeting with an answer to, here's what I'm doing about it. And I think even having that on a one-to-one basis with individuals is just so, so valuable. You're sat there saying, okay, so I've noticed over the last 2 weeks, you've done no BD calls. Why is that? And if they turn around and say, you know what, of the last 10 days, 6 of those have been out in client meetings, meeting people, and I've done A, B, and C as a result, fair enough. I'm not going to hold you over a barrel and say, oh, your dials are red for not doing enough BD calls, but I can see you've done other stuff that's valuable. That's fine. But it's just making sure you've got that data to have the conversation, I think, is the most important part.
Because the data will then allow you to ask the right questions. And that's what your job is as a manager and a leader, is to use the data to ask the right questions. What's happening here? Yeah, is it a problem or isn't it a problem? Well, if it is a problem, what can we do to positively influence that? because it's going to become a bigger problem if we don't do anything. But if it's not a problem, okay, great. But what contingency do we need to make sure that it doesn't become a problem next week? So having those objective scorecards is really easy in as a salesperson. Where it becomes a bit harder is where I have worked with people that run marketing teams or finance teams, or they're head of ops, or business improvement. It's like, okay, well, let's create an objective scorecard for you that you can measure success against, right? Because that's important, right? You want to know objectively whether you're being successful in your job or not, but also how you can use that then to spot those early indicators that might mean that you're going to have a bit of a problem further down the line. So yeah, that traffic light system is incredibly powerful, but it's about that objective accountability. Derry, that you can hold people accountable objectively to what's on that scorecard, right? Because it shouldn't lie, right?
But the one thing I dislike about data sometimes is people do use it as a black and white carrot or stick, really. It's like, oh, you haven't done your target. Why is that? Like, you're in deep shit now, basically. Whereas again, I think the most important thing is to be able to ask for context. It's one thing I'm always I overanalyze numbers a lot, and not so much the actual numbers and what they are, but more the measure, and being like, okay, is there a way that either A, someone can gain the system here and just get these numbers populated without really having quality behind it? And two, will I miss context by not having another number in assistant to this, right? And this is why sometimes you end up with spreadsheets that can have 80 plus metrics on there, trying to track all these things. So you've always got that context, and it's trying to find that balance of when you go too far and when too far is too far and you have to then dial things back. When you're sitting down with your customers to ask you a question here, or your clients, whatever you want to call them, what are the kind of core things that you're encouraging them to think about when it comes to data analytics? What are the most important measures that someone listening to this podcast today should take away and start thinking, okay, can I get access to those numbers in real time? And if not, I should do something about it.
Well, first of all, a very wise man, Jefferson Garn, an amazing leadership coach I worked with for a good few years. I remember him saying to me that context is everything, right? And regardless of whether that's data, whatever you do, or however you're managing context, the context of what's happening is everything. Not only in terms of, okay, why we're doing it, which is, I think, what people want more context on now, but data. So if you look at data on its own, just this week, without looking in the context of probably a rolling 12-week period, it doesn't mean anything, right? Because actually, that context will allow you to understand where you are at this particular point in time, right? But like I say, the data allows you to ask the questions, right? And the question might be around context. And I'm not a big fan of asking, well, why haven't you sent enough CVs? It's okay. Well, you need to send 8 CVs out. That's what your what good looks like, and that's what your metrics set out based on your past performance. You've only sent out 4 so far. Talk to me about what's happening. Yeah, what can be changed or do different? You'll stop doing. But in terms of the key metrics, obviously you've got your lead indicator, which are placements, and I like to focus on volume of placements.
Oh, placements.
Sorry, your lag. Yeah,
lead.
Getting confused. The lag placement.
It's Friday morning. Forgiven.
Thanks, mate. Lag indicator, your placement numbers, right? Then you've got your CVs, first interviews, jobs, because those are the conditions that you need to create in order to make placements. So you target people on the conditions that you need to create rather than just the placements. Then you've always got CVs outstanding awaiting feedback, because they're the conditions that you need to create in order to get first interviews. And I also like to look at forward first interviews. So these are the number of interviews that are happening today and in the future. Right? Because I knew at JCW, if that dropped below 40 forward first interviews, then that was a red flag, right? I also
and for us that would be like demos pending, for example. Have we got enough stuff about to happen that could lead to an opportunity being created or not? If not, then we're in deep shit,
so those kind of like your core 5, and then you've got your lead indicators. Yeah, and I like to focus on 2 of each. What are the key two metrics we need to focus on that are going to create CVs? And what are the key 2 metrics that we need to focus on that are going to create jobs? Okay. So then you've got 4, there's 9, 10 indicators there. So it's exactly halfway actually on the Traction's recommended scorecard, right? So then obviously you can keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper. But if you have got a real handle on that at a macro and a team and an individual level, and everybody knows what they need to do with those 10 indicators based on their past performance, then you can manage threats to your pipeline and you can make decisions that are going to positively impact the future. That's all it needs to be.
Totally.
Those 10 indicators.
Keep it super simple. If you need to get more in depth in inspecting those numbers into, well, like obviously one thing people might say there, and I completely get this, is if people are tracking phone time as a wonderful example, about half our customers track like phone time. Is, are you getting enough time to actually get on the phone and speak to people? There's that classic example of, oh, they'll call their nan, have an half an hour conversation and show that they've done half an hour of call time today. It's again making sure you've got the ability to dive into those numbers. All right, someone's done 11 out of 10 CVs this week. Fantastic. Well done. Can we look at those, please? Are they all going to one job? Are they to multiple jobs? Is it the same candidate going to multiple jobs? Talk me through. And the thing I love the most, the favorite question that I think I hear managers have with consultants is, talk me through these CVs. Why have you sent that person over? Why do you think they're a good fit? What's the relationship like with the contact here? Are they receptive to these CVs coming through? Because you know full well that if the golden metrics to me are CVs and interviews, and very quickly to go on that as a side note, I think CVs are so important because it shows, one, that you've got a job, and two, that you've got a candidate. The two things that you need to bring together. Interviews are then the sort of acceptance criteria for the client to say, yeah, this is actually a really good match. Well done. It's that sort of confirmation. And those two together, that's the bridge that you have to be able to cross. So I think if you can sit down and really understand CVs in more depth and know, okay, each CV was sent out. Why is this candidate right? What's the relationship like with the contact? How receptive are they to these things? That's where the money's made, realistically. Once the interviews start happening, a lot of it comes down to the candidate. But at that point, I think you've got to be so all over that and being able to go deeper beyond just a number against a target, for example.
Yes, because you've got two things there. You've got your quantitative data, which is number of CVs.
Yeah.
Then you've got your qualitative data, which is observed rather than measured. So actually, okay, you sent 10 CVs. Let's have a look at the quality of those CVs. Now, we can use data to help determine that, right? Because if from those 10 CVs we get 2 first interviews, well, is that good?
Yeah.
Actually, we probably say, no, it's not, because 5 CVs to an interview, that means 80% of your candidates aren't getting interviewed, which is not great.
Yeah.
Now, if it's actually, well, from those 10 CVs, we've got 8 first interviews. Well, actually, that's good. So we know the quality is good, but there's only 2 ways you can make more placements, and that's either do more or do better. And this is where it becomes a bit nuanced, because some agencies will focus on one or the other. They'll focus on quantity or they'll focus on quality. But the reality is, it's not binary. It's what do we need to do more of and what do we need to do better? So you need to have an eye on both of those things. And the data will help to guide you where you need to do more or where you need to do better. It won't tell you what the problem is. You've got to pop the hood and use your kind of intuition to find out where the challenges are. But, you know, it's quantity and quality. You can't just focus on one.
Yeah, you're aware of the sort of work we're doing internally at the minute around product and all that, right? Like the philosophy that I set out to my team when we first started building out the new reporting functionality we're working on today is no one really looks at a report and immediately comes away with an action. They come out with another question. It's question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, and then action.
Yeah.
And your goal, our goal as a team really is to help you get from that first question to the answer as fast as you can. Yeah. Like if you're having to rummage through more and more data and you get frustrated because you can't find it, suddenly you think you're dipping into 2 or 3 different systems and asking people questions, and really it's a day and a half until you get the actual answer to that first question, by which time 5 more problems have arose that you then got to try and find answers to. It's just not effective. And it sounds so counterintuitive to say. I don't want people to stay in our product for very long. I want them to come in with a question, get the answer, and be able to go and take an action against that as soon as possible. That should be the dream state. But to do that, you need to have access to that data.
Yes. Yeah. You need to have access to it. It needs to have integrity, and you need to be able to then interpret it. But it would always lead to the human aspect, which is, okay, let's have a look at what you're doing. Right. That's where data will just guide you to where you need to start that conversation with that person first. Right. Is it around quantity? Is it around quality? So let's sit down and have a look and work out together what we can do more of or do better, right? And then it comes down to training, process, coaching. But data's the start. It won't tell you everything, and you can get lost in it, but it will guide you where to start that conversation with that person.
And that comes back to your kind of leadership and management piece that you speak about a lot with your clients is, cool, you've got data. Let's not see it in black and white and use it as a stick purely when a number is missed by 5 to 10%. Let's understand why and really go for the context as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, there's the education piece. Actually, do a consultant level, do they understand their data? Because they're only going to engage in it if they understand it, but not as not as a stick and a carrot. It's actually, how can it help me achieve my goals? going back to what we said first of all, right? Actually, if I understand my ratios and I understand exactly the conditions I need to create each week in terms of my lead and lag indicators, well, that gives me the opportunity to hold myself accountable to doing that, right? And if I need to send 40 CVs to get a placement, well, actually, I need to work out what I need to change or do differently or stop doing to bring that ratio down. There's a quality issue there. You've got to get consultants engaged with the data, but not in a kind of admin kind of way. How can it help me achieve my goals? How can it help me get promoted or save for that?
It comes back to that classic thing of what's in it for me.
Yeah, of course. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. People do want to know, well, and this is what I talk to managers a lot. It's that if you're going to make a change or introduce something new, then yes, you have to give it context in terms of creating awareness of why you're introducing a change or asking them to do something. But actually, you've got to create a desire for that individual to engage in that change. People don't like change. They've got to have a reason to do it. And as a leader, you have to give them the reason. This is what's in it for you. It's going to save you time. It's going to make you more money. It's going to help you get promoted quicker. It's going to help you get more clients. Whatever it is, there's got to be a reason for that person to engage in that change. And I think across all sectors I've worked with, managers aren't necessarily, or leaders don't communicate that change effectively sometimes. Don't create awareness, i.e. context, and they don't create a desire for an individual to engage in that change. And then they've got to give them the training to and the coaching to be able to do what they need them to do.
Yeah.
And then reflect back and go, actually, we've made this change, guys, and this is the impact it's had. We've got 15 more meetings this month. Or actually, we've made this change, guys, and it's not worked, so we're going to iterate it or we're going to can it.
Experiments at that point, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. We tend to go out, make a change, and then forget about it and consult.
Which makes me laugh because, again, Gary Goldsmith was saying this yesterday, is ultimately back at S3 when he worked there, they were scientists. They were always trying new things. There was always an experiment to run in some way, shape or form. And it's being willing to always try new things and being willing to experiment, as I said, and see what impact does that have. If it doesn't work, okay, we tried and it failed. Science never came about overnight. We all heard about the many failures that people have had, and now the best things have come about by accident. And it's being willing to do that. But to do that, as we keep on saying, you need data for it, right?
You do. But you
keeps on coming back to that point.
In order to understand whether something is going to work or not, people have got to be engaged in actually doing it. And like I say, people miss out on that. Okay, we're making this change, or we're doing it. This is the reason why, and this is what's in it for you. And then people are much more likely to go and do that. And then you can get a true north on whether it works or not. But if it doesn't work, you've got to feed back and say it's not working. Or if it does work, feed back and say it is. These are the results. And that's the bit that tends to get lost. Change is fine as long as it's communicated in the correct way.
Completely agree. I'm very aware, by the way, we are. I always aim for 35 to 40 minute podcasts, and yesterday I had a 1 hour 25 minute one. This one's now an hour.
Right,
so
okay.
We'll have to start wrapping things up. We can talk about data analytics for hours. As you can tell, it's a topic we're both very much into.
Yes.
Maybe we'll do a part 2 at some point. I know we're doing some webinars in the future as well to talk about this stuff in more depth. So
hopefully I can get my camera working in the future.
And I'm pretty sure my marketing guy will be screaming at me if any of those webinars we try and run start going on this long. So we'll look to wrap things up shortly. Before we do that, though, I always love asking, I think I told you earlier on, about like a favourite sales story you can think of and a horror story that you've had. Because you always get some really interesting tales from the past that get pulled out here. Hasn't got to be about you. It can be about someone else if you want, or it can be about you. That's always quite fun when it's a personal one. The horror story I had from Gary Goldsmith yesterday was when he didn't ask a single question to one of his clients. The client contact that he had then came to work for him and said to him, "Why did you never ask me this question?" And he was like, "Well, what do you mean?" She's like, "Well, if you'd asked that, we had 300 contractors I could have given you on the other side of the business." And he was like, "You are kidding me." A lot of money being lost there by not asking one simple question. So I want to know if you've got any interesting stories of your own that you'd like to share.
I think my, when I first started in recruitment at Hayes, I mean, it's definitely not on that level. Although we did at Hayes, when the financial crisis hit, you're probably too young to remember this, Derry, 2008, 2009.
I was around, but not really in the middle of that that shitstorm. No.
We lost. I mean, I think it was Hayes. I can remember one month we lost nearly 250 contractors. Early terms.
Ouch.
Yeah, it was actually a really dark time. But I think my first introduction into recruitment was my second week. I managed to call a client and market in a CV of a person that was actually was actually working there and didn't have the nous. So they asked me who the name was, and I was kind of, a bit naive and told them the name, and they said, well, they're already working for me. Why have you got their CV? At which point I just put the phone down.
Oops.
And right, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my job. And they just shrugged their shoulders and said, oh, don't worry about it. These things happen.
Fair enough.
Okay, that's good. Good.
over one candidate, maybe not the end of the world. It happens 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Then it's a conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Learn from your mistakes, Ash. Yeah,
that's it. It.
And then what was the other one?
It's a favourite sales story and a horror sales story.
Oh God, favourite sales story.
What do you look back on in history, either with a client you've worked with or someone that you've managed, or even yourself, that you look back on and think that was a highlight of my career and why I still do what I do today? Well,
do you know what? Actually, it's probably since I left recruitment and got into what I'm doing now, I found it's really important to really look after the clients that you're working with, even more so when you're self-employed, because it's your lifeblood. And I started working with a client called Trinova. They were my second client. I'd known Ash Lawrence for years, and he started Trinova Group, and I think it was about 30 people at the time. And I worked with them over 4 years, and the business grew to about 220 people, and they put 70 people through leadership programs with me over those 4 years. And I think for me that was a real success, because not necessarily, it wasn't a sales success, but actually really getting to know that business and understand it and genuinely feel a part of it. And I genuinely felt that I had a really small part in helping that business achieve the success that it did over the years. And I think it's just testament to investing in, if you really invest in your clients and really take time and really make the effort and go out of your way, then they'll invest in you back.
Totally. I love that one as well. Because I think what we spoke about earlier on, for a lot of consultants that I know, or fractionals as they're called in the software world sometimes, fractional CFO or fractional whatever it might be, they do talk about how the journey is lonely, but when you get to kind of ride a really fun journey and feel like you're part of something and that you've had a contribution towards that, it does feel amazing, and you never really forget that feeling. It does.
And I think, when you do consultancy, there's kind of like, well, I should just charge for kind of like, like law firms do, literally charge for every minute, every hour. But actually, when you give things back and you don't get really sort of granular or overcharging, and you go that extra mile, I think people genuinely appreciate it. As a client, I ran a half day session with the other day because they really needed some help, and I knew that finances were tight, as they are with a lot of businesses at the moment. So I went in and did that half day with them for free of charge. And okay, well, I could have charged, but actually, I think they'll appreciate that I did that for them.
Yeah, and you hope it's kind of they remember, and one day you kind of pay it forward, right?
Yeah, and I enjoy doing it. I love the client, and I've worked with them for years, and I enjoy doing it. So yeah, good. Yeah, I think looking after your clients is really important, and genuinely
kind of turn it into a half story, half tip. But I think I'll take it as well. People always like learning things, so I'll take that one.
Don't be giving away all your time for free, Derry.
Try your best not to. Yeah. Awesome. So final one from you then. Any kind of shout outs? Where can people find you if they've got any questions or want to reach out and get in touch?
Yeah, so obviously I'm on LinkedIn. Do you know what? LinkedIn's a funny thing. I've been on it for, 20 years, and I've never really posted anything, but I've just started posting things on LinkedIn, and then trying to work out how actually the algorithm works so I can get more views. But anyway, I'm posting some stuff on LinkedIn around leadership, and some kind of new ideas around leadership and what people are looking for in this post-pandemic environment. But yeah, I do leadership programs from people that are just moving into their first leadership role to existing leadership teams, directors. I work with CEOs, MDs. I do executive coaching, team coaching. Recruitment is the industry that I know the best and love. I do work with tech businesses as well, because they go through similar kind of challenges in their growth. Normally they grow quite quickly. So yeah, if anybody does want to get in contact and have a chat about any of that sort of stuff, then LinkedIn or arpd.co.uk is my website.
ARPD, nice and easy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Is that Ashley Rice personal development?
Professional.
Professional
Yeah, it was
development?
close.
So close.
Yeah.
So close.
Well done.
I should have used the word professional. We're talking on a B2B podcast. Of course, it's to be professional. Well, Ash, that has been an absolute delight. Even without the face on screen, I imagine you looked absolutely radiant the whole time. So thank you so much for your time, mate.
I did.
I really look forward to the podcast that we're doing in future as well.
Thank you, Derry. It's been good fun. Thanks very much.
No worries.